This story happened when I was 12 years old. I'm a female and 25. The story I'm about to tell you might not be scary to most, but for me and my parents, it was. I remember it was a Saturday night, around 9 or 10 p.m. during summertime. I owned one dog at the time. His name is Benny. My parents decided that night that they feel like going on a walk around the block, walking Benny, and asked me whether I wanted to join them. I said no, because I wanted to play PWI on my PC, Perfect World International. My parents were okay with leaving me alone, since the walk wouldn't take longer than 30 minutes tops. As my parents would get dressed to leave the house, I logged in PWI and looked around in my guild and global chat to see if anyone was on. For some reason, no one was, so I decided to join my parents. I get dressed, I put Benny on his leash, and we all leave. I'd like to mention that I lived in an apartment building that had 10 floors, and we lived on the very first floor. Not sure how to explain it, but you have the basement of the building, and then the first row of apartments. Basically, you enter the building, and already you're facing apartments. I lived in the very first one. I remember always hating that because whoever would pass by our door, we would hear them at any time of the day or night. Whoever was lurking at night, we would hear them. It was somewhat eerie to live on floor 0. Anyway, we leave the house. My dad closes the door. We had 3 keyholes and a steel bar that would block the door from the inside. The bar covered half the door. Precautions were my father's obsession. We exit the building and enjoy our walk. After 15 minutes, we realize that the wind has changed from a warm summer wind to incoming storm wind. My mom makes the call to go back home, as Benny already did all of his duties. We open the building door, climb the 5 stairs to our door, and attempt to open it. My father does the following: unlocks the first 3 locks, and then attempts to unlock the metal bar that holds the door closed. At that moment, my father pauses, turns around at us with the most serious face I've ever seen on him, and whispers to us to call the police and ring the neighbor's door. My mom goes to the second apartment, and the neighbor, who I will call Ted, comes out asking my father what happened. My dad whispered to him, covering the see-through hole of the door, "Someone is in our house. He or they are holding the door. Please stay here with my family and attempt to open it. I will be back." After saying that, I see my father rush, all by himself, around the building in the dark. I say dark because we didn't have a street light on the side of our apartment facing the block garden. My dad disappears into the darkness. I go outside too, not following him too much, but only to hear if he's in trouble. He's my dad, don't judge me. As soon as I get out, I hear him shout, "Hey, you, come back. Who the hell do you think you are? I called the police." At the same time I hear him shout, I look at Ted, who manages to open the door and enter the house. I go in after them and enter my house. It no longer felt like my house. In just 15 minutes while we were walking, the home invaders made a complete mess of our house. All of our shelves and wardrobes were pulled out, our clothes scattered all over the house. Benny's dry food was all over the floor, indicating they must have tripped in his bowls, probably not knowing we owned a dog. But what scared me the most was how organized they were. I say they because, after seeing the disaster that was left behind, we knew it was impossible for just one person to hold the door, steal, and organize what they would want to take with them. I say organized because the thieves put in our living room, all packed and ready, what they wanted but couldn't steal. On the couch, they placed our laptops, one of our TVs, my father's collection of coins, our phones, chargers, wallets, and even my father's camera. He's a photographer, and that week we had to attend a wedding. They didn't have enough time to steal all of that, so they just settled with some of my mom's jewelry and some pocket money. After seeing this in my silly child mind, I rushed to my room to check my piggy bank. I always saved up money from whatever chores I did. It wasn't much, but it was my work and savings, and at that time, I thought they stole it too. When I entered my room, I see the metal bars covering my windows are cut open and my window broken. This is how they entered, through my room. My room is the only room facing the side of the building and the one most secluded from views. Needless to say, I never felt safe in my own room, in which I had to live for the next 10 years of my life until I moved in with my fiancé. The police arrives and they start throwing white dust. I have no idea what this is still, all over our house to find fingerprints. They take pictures, take our statements, analyze my room and window. They were unable to catch the home invaders, but were able to tell us that this invasion was not the only one in our neighborhood. During that month, another 4 houses were broken into, one of them being the home of a cop, not related with the cops at our home. They told us that the invaders analyzed their victims, learned their schedule, even knew where the children's rooms were, as they seemed to be entering the houses through the children's windows. All the families affected by them had children. They didn't expect us to be back that soon and panicked. Hence, one of them was holding the door with his body so that the others could flee. The person after which my dad was shouting was probably the one holding the door and escaping last through my broken window. I don't know what could have happened if I didn't change my mind and give up on waiting for gears and PWI. I would probably have come face to face with these invaders. I'm happy I didn't, and I hope to God I never ever meet with them. Period. Quick detail. This was almost 2 years ago when my husband and I just moved into a townhouse. We have our front door with a regular deadbolt lock, and our back door has, no joke, 5 different locks. Our city isn't always the safest, so we didn't question. About 1 month after we moved in, we get a knock on our door. We were confused, but maybe it's a neighbor needing something, so my husband opens the door. It ends up being a man we haven't seen before, and he said he was a maintenance man, here to fix our back door. We explained to him that we didn't call for anyone, and that our back door was completely fine. He kept insisting that he was at the correct place, and we kept insisting, no, he was in fact not. What threw us off was the fact that we have not personally seen him before, and we have met most of the workers, since we needed some things fixed when we first moved here. And he also wasn't wearing a uniform like they usually do. Next thing we know, he goes,
"Let me show you,"
and just walks right in and heads to our back door. My husband gives me a look as in saying, "Get up and behind me," because it obviously made him nervous. The guy walks to our door and looks surprised seeing all the locks. He undoes them all and opens it for a quick second before saying,
"Oops, wrong place,"
and just turns around and walks back out the front door without another word. My husband locks everything back up quick, and we literally never see the guy again. We didn't do anything as of calling the office like we should have, but we thought maybe we were overreacting, and maybe it was just the wrong place. But also, it felt like we were being scouted in some way. Sorry, I know this isn't a very crazy story, but it did creep me out a bit. For reference, I'm from Australia, female, and at the time, I was about 15 or so. This story starts with me as a teenager, living at home with my mom, stepdad Richard, and 4 siblings. Back in those days, and having 3 brothers, I was a pretty hardcore gamer. My mom was a pretty heavy sleeper since she was working full-time and caring for my stepdad, who had stage 4 testicular cancer, so I'd spend most of my nights staying up late, gaming. One particular night, at about 2 a.m., I could hear someone walking around the backyard. You know that crunching of grass, the slight shuffle of boots on concrete? The fact that the family dog Sammy wasn't barking led me to believe that it was just my stepdad. My stepdad often walked around the backyard at night to help with his restless leg syndrome that was caused by the chemo. The restless legs would keep Mom awake, so he tried to walk it off so she could get some much-needed rest. So as far as I was concerned, nothing was out of the ordinary, and I gamed on. Quite a bit later, I heard some noises in the kitchen, but again, I assumed it was just my stepdad taking painkillers or making a sandwich, which was pretty normal, so I naturally ignored it and gamed on. I eventually went to bed, and when I got up in the morning, Mom was on the phone, looking very shaken, and she motioned for me to sit down at the table. I was pretty groggy and out of it, but I started to feel a bit panicked. Mom was meant to be at work. She rarely had days off, even when she was sick, because she had 5 kids and one very sick husband to take care of. Finally, she gets off the phone and sits down. Mom tells me that during the night, someone was in her room. She said that she thought it was my stepdad at first, and the conversation went something like this. I'm paraphrasing. It was a long time ago. Mom, what are you doing? She could see someone near her chest of drawers where her jewelry box was. Him.
Nothing. Go back to sleep.
Mom, Richard, is that you? Him.
Yes. Go back to sleep.
She was pretty out of it because she was half asleep, but she remembered that something about the whole exchange didn't feel right. She said that it didn't even sound like my stepdad speaking, and that she'd woken up because she heard something drop on the ground. She didn't think too much about it at the time because of how tired she was, so she rolled over and went back to sleep. In the morning when she got up, she saw that her jewelry box was on the ground and a few pieces of jewelry were missing, including priceless family heirlooms that were willed to her by her late grandmother. She went to the kitchen and saw that her phone and my stepdad's phone was missing, so using the landline, back when people still had those, she calls the police, and we later on learn the rest of the story. Our backyard faces a communal nature walkthrough type of thing. A man climbed our fence, there's a gate, but we always keep it padlocked, and walked around the house, checking all the doors to get inside, which is why I could hear all that shuffling and scuffling outside. We later learned that my younger sister had snuck the family dog in her bed that night, which is why Sammy didn't bark at the intruder. My mom's bedroom has a sliding door in the backyard, but she never locked it because she didn't see the point. The man had gotten inside through that door and must have noticed the jewelry box, but it was obviously very dark, and he dropped it as he went to pick it up, thus waking Mom up. Once they had their little convo, and Mom had gone back to sleep, he went to the kitchen and started looking for anything of value. He'd found the phones, pocketed them, and promptly left through the laundry door and over the fence. My stepdad had actually chosen that night, of all nights, to take a late-night stroll through the neighborhood to clear his head and help with the restless legs. He'd gotten back after everything had happened and was none the wiser until morning. The police told us that we weren't the only people whose house was invaded that night. Apparently, 4 other houses had been hit, and that there was a huge priority on finding the perpetrator. Funnily enough, my mom and stepdad's phones were both found in someone else's house, so they thankfully got their phones back a few days later. A few weeks after this whole ordeal, we learned that the intruder had been found. Sadly, he'd sold the family heirlooms for drug money. Dude was just a scummy meth head, but he had a gun in his possession, and it was just luck that no one was harmed with it. He was eventually sent to prison. So, on behalf of my mom, scummy meth head home invader, let's never meet again. I was maybe around 13 to 14 years old at the time, and I was recently granted the privilege of staying home alone. Every now and then, when I was home alone, I'd hear sounds coming from upstairs, and so I would instinctively call my mom. She then told me a story of how she used to hear things in her old house all the time, and how it was just the house settling in. Fast forward to many instances of sounds later, I decided that the very next time I was going to be home alone, I was going to be completely silent and make as little noise as possible. Within the first half hour, there was nothing, not a peep out of the entire house. I eventually got bored and felt safe, so I went to go grab the TV remote to watch some TV. But a few seconds before I grabbed the remote, I heard a huge crash upstairs. and running footsteps. I was sure, more than ever, that someone was in the house. By now, there were plenty of consistent sounds coming from upstairs, that it was a fact that someone was upstairs. 14-year-old me decided to hatch a quick plan. Being the skinny, most non-threatening little girl I was, I first grabbed a kitchen knife. Then, I grabbed a shoe and propped open the front door. And after a few moments of some deep breaths, I yelled out in the deepest voice I could, "I know you are upstairs. I'm giving you a chance to leave without me calling the police, but I have propped the front door open, and I will be in the bathroom. Be aware that I'm holding a knife, and if you refuse to leave, I will call the police." Sure enough, I walk into the bathroom with my knife, absolutely scared to death that someone will open the door. I wait, and I wait, until the one sound that to this day will always scare me for this reason. I heard the front door close, and the shoe was moved. I quickly locked the door and turned on the alarm system. I hope to never see this person, or even hear this person, again.